The Matthew Dark Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, praise God and welcome in. Well, we have a signed by both parties MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. Now, what does it really mean? We're going to go through it. It really means nothing because it does buy 60 days to get to some meats and potatoes of the nuclear part. That, of course, this was the whole purpose. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And so we're going to get that inked allegedly within 60 days. But I think what's more important, what was revealed. Are there some winners? Absolutely. Losers for sure in this. But we'll start with this first release of the sanctions on Iran oil. Now, if you recall, back in the Obama deal that got all the hoopla, the 1.7 on in cash on a plane, middle of the night thing, and everybody went berserk about it. And as of course, that was a settlement from a long-standing lawsuit that Iran had filed against the United States for arms purchases that were never delivered. United States kept the money. It crept up to a massive number with interest in the millions and billions over 50 years. And so that was that deal. Now, we're not here to say what a great deal, what a great leader President Obama was. But if you recall at the time, too, sanctions on Iran oil. And so they sell black market, black label, out the back door, bootleg oil, because that's all they can get away with, right? We took them out of the game. This deal immediately puts Iran back in the game for energy. You are going to have to do business with Iran in perpetuity. If you do want to mess with them, they close the Strait of Hormuz. If Israel wants to get cute and go back into Lebanon, they can close the Strait of Hormuz. So that's going to start immediately. That is in the terms of this signed deal. Okay, that's number one. Number two is this 300 billion that everybody is talking about. This is absolutely going to be given to Iran in the Reconstruction. So whether they get that now or in 60 days, but they're saying with good behavior, 300 billion for a redevelopment project in Iran. So we have to understand that this cost 100 billion to blow it up, to mess it up. That's the cost of the military to go do these things. Then the cost at home, of course, we paid a lot in fuel. We still pay a lot in fuel. We're still needing relief there, but it's caused inflationary conditions in our U.S. economy. So we have 100 billion out and then a $300 billion, and they say it's going to be investors from the Middle East and all this stuff. It's going to be U.S. taxpayer dollar, printed money that then goes to Iran. So you're going to build back a big, beautiful Iran. They're going to be selling oil to the world. They're going to be flush with cash coming in. They're going to be a major player at the table. And so you sit back and you look at that and you say, okay, so then what's the U.S. get out of it? Well, we're going to walk away with this supposed agreement, and it's 10 years and 20 years on the Iranian enrichment. And you have to understand, there is no way Iran is going to relinquish any opportunity at any point in the future, now until the world blows up, that they can never enrich uranium, that they can never have missiles. And Trump said, I don't think it's fair. They can't have missiles. Saudi Arabia has missiles. All these people have missiles. I can't really tell them you can't have missiles, right? So that is going on as we speak, to where we are strengthening Iran. They were not in the oil game like this prior to February 28th. Of course, the killing of the King Ayatollah, and then of course the destruction. Remember, we killed the 186 school children. The bombing right next to the military bases in Iran, and so we did all that destruction. Spent 100 billion. So we've gotten what we've wanted. We've gotten to a deal, right? So Strait of Hormuz opening immediately. It's still going to take some logistical time, and at the time of this show, J.D. Vance, who had a trip to Switzerland, that was on pause because of technical potential delays, concerns, issues on the opening of the strait. Okay, so now we have all these tankers that need to get their way all around the world. They've got to come through a narrow area for that many ships. And so there's some logistical stuff. It absolutely could be there's going to be no deal on the table, because you do have a loser in this deal. And the loser country out of this is, of course, Israel, right? So Israel was the propagator of the U.S. involvement, of course. Marco Rubio said it, if you remember. Israel was going to attack Iran. We knew that Iran would attack military assets, U.S. assets in the Middle East. So we preemptively bombed the snot out of them, just went to town on them. Okay. So again, Israel was the propeller on that. He said that. Then, of course, Trump's big thing this whole time has been um, they can't have a nuclear weapon. People are they're laying awake at night in America. They're scared to death. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's what Trump says repeatedly. And he's going to walk away pretending, patting himself on the back, that the fact that they've got this potential on the table for no nuclear as the winner. But look at the cost. Look at what you did to Iran. Now you're going to have to negotiate, play ball with them like you would any other country that's in flush natural resources like Iran and really primo geographical position. Those are both very crucial elements. And then a country, a neighbor, their adversary, Israel, of course, has no natural resources, is a tenth the size, and is walking away as the odd man out. Because, see, at the end of the day, the hopes for Israel and the U.S. involvement, it was simple. Smother them, take them out, regime change it, turn into a chaotic Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq style of country, and then they would begin to move deeper into the Middle East and take the greater Israel. That was, of course, the play. They can't have an adversary, a power like Iran, in the way of that. It wasn't going to work. So, of course, Trump bought it, hook, line, and sinker. No nuclear. You've got to do it now. The whole world rides on this. Trump still thinks that they were 2 or 3 weeks away. He was lied to with that, and he didn't question it until just about now, where you can tell he's a little pissed that he had to do this. He's grateful it's over. He's wanted a deal so bad. Remember, before this signed memorandum, 39 promises of we have a deal on the table. We're looking so good. And he's got this kind of temporary agreement right now. So we're looking at the winner, clearly Iran. They're going to get money and they're going to be a player in the oil game. Done. They won. Loser? Well, of course, United States loses because it's always so expensive to do this. But Israel is the loser. So they did not get the outcome in Iran that they were begging for, which was annihilation. And then they creeped forward. Didn't get it. They got the opposite. They've got now a situation with Iran and the U.S. in which they're partnered up on this agreement. In this agreement, Israel has to stay out of Lebanon. They can't come in there anymore. Hezbollah is going to be there. Israel can keep its military forces in this sort of demilitarized zone to protect themselves, but they cannot be in Lebanon anymore. They cannot invade and steal Lebanon as they were in pursuit of prior to Trump saying, hey, we've got a deal on the table. You're going to mess this up. And even since they've known they've had this deal on the table this week, Israel has continued to fire with Hezbollah. So Iran is saying that you must have, you must put that dog on a leash. Okay, they cannot be doing that, and we're not going to come in and we're not going to send Hezbollah into Israel. But the problem is Israel wanted a war that lasted much longer, cost much more money, and had a lot more death in it. This was not going to work, ending it right now. So they're still going to pursue their interest in Lebanon. And the problem is Iran is saying, hey, we told you to put your dog on a leash, and now look what it's done. It's bitten a child. Okay. And so the deal's off. We're going to do what we have to do in the Strait. We're going to have to do what we have to do to Israel. And then it comes to the question of with the United States at this moment in time, kind of as pissed as Trump is at Bibi. And he can't really say, he's not being honest with us. He's trying to say what a great guy he is. We're going to talk a little bit about Bibi. He is in some major trouble, deservingly so. But you ask yourself then, okay, how was Israel going to come out on top of this? They had to have Iran out of the picture, out of the game, and it didn't work. So now they're the odd man out because Trump said he sent them a copy of the deal. They're saying they never saw it. They got cut out. So I want everybody to stop back here for a second. Israel is shoved down our throat all the time as our greatest ally, the only democracy in the Middle East. We wouldn't even have America without Israel. You've heard it over and over. They shove it down your throat. Well, we didn't even ask for their opinion, not even a seat at the table when discussing this with Iran, when it was Israel that got us in there in the first place. Do you see the irony that our greatest ally would be a detriment to negotiating a peace deal with Iran? Does anybody have any questions? Who's the problem in the three? It's of course Israel, and they came out the loser, and they're actually going to be in some really scary territory because number one, they have an election in the fall, and Benjamin Netanyahu, if he doesn't win, he's going to jail. His trial is back on, and he spends not just the life of shame as a horrible prime minister for Israel, really a disservice to his people, but he's actually going to lose his liberty. He's going to actually be in jail, in prison, fraud and corruption charges. He's been able to put that off for a long time now because he's been claiming October 7th has put them in another permanent state of war against Hamas, and we had to decimate Gaza, and that was in fact genocide. It was the definition of this cultural people is being removed from that land because of their cultural DNA. That's what happened in Gaza. They did it by starvation and murder and bombing and decimation. What they did, they're never going to get over what they did in Gaza. We all saw it and we're sorry, but it turned a lot of people off. And then what turned a lot of even more people off, was this thing with Iran. You have this just sliver of the MAGA base. It's about 25% of that nice, wonderful, beautiful MAGA base. And if you remember, came down the escalator in 2015, and MAGA said, we are all in. Well, he's lost a tremendous amount of that to support. As far as the war goes, about 25% of, say, his 100 million fans thought this was a good idea. And a lot of them did it because of this imaginary relationship they have with Israel, in which they're not even going to church. They really have no idea the context of the Judeo-Christian relationship that they're so, invested in. But that 25% of his fans was all he had left. This war had to come to an end ASAP. Trump is also in a world of trouble because what happens as soon as we do verify, okay, peace is breaking out. Donald Trump, you've done a wonderful job, we'll pretend, in settling this situation, even though if the idea was to take Iran out, you did the opposite. You flushed them with cash and you put them in front of all the major players around the world. They're going to be an energy dominant country. That doesn't sound like the goal we were promised. They kind of had to be regime changed. That didn't work. And now we're giving money, resources, and just a place to make a ton of money. So I worry about that. But Trump, he has a lot to worry about because what's waiting for him when he gets home? Well, the Epstein files. The Epstein files have gone nowhere. Of course, Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, who Trump did nominate as attorney general, he will never get confirmed for that. There is no way. Remember, Todd Blanche is Donald Trump's personal attorney for the Stormy Daniels case. Of course, this is the 130,000 during the first campaign, the hush money, whatever. Okay. We knew Trump has had a lot of affairs. We believe he's had many, many affairs. He's, of course, been married 3 times. We know he's mentioned up to 34,000 times in the Epstein files. We know he's doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. He loves women. That's his thing. And we're supposed to say he was treating them all as a gentleman should. And we don't believe that. So the Epstein files are here. They're waiting. They're calling your name, Donald Trump. So we can't put the distraction of war, because if you really think about it, here's our timeline. January 30th, the Epstein files, finally, we got our dump. We got our $3.5 million from the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Of course, that's Ro Khanna and Tom Massey, the authors of that bill and sponsors of that bill. And we got them January 30. On February 11th, we had Pam Bondi's House oversight testimony. And it wasn't even an Epstein hearing, but that's what we talked most about. We heard most about. They went after her relentlessly. And of course, she gave that bumbling, stumbling, kind of the most embarrassing congressional testimony I think you'll ever hear. And Joe Biden's cabinet was full of just complete buffoons and just people lying to you. And it's like, what, are you kidding me? How did you get this position? Pam Bondi was worse than all of those. It wasn't close. There wasn't a second place within shouting distance of the performance that Pam Bondi gave there. But that was February the 11th. And of course, we know on February the 28th, and then in between the start of the war on February the 28th and the February 11th hearing of Pam Bondi, she was subpoenaed to testify again. We were going to do this under oath, and we were going to do this all about Epstein. She had been subpoenaed, and of course, he dismissed her February 28th. The war starts. And so we've put Epstein on the back burner. We'll never stop talking about it on this show or in public or at church or wherever I go. We have an institution of pedophilia that we somehow are saying they're off limits for prosecution and eventual hanging. I don't know where they got that idea. That is incorrect. We don't care. Go start 5,000 more wars. We are never going to stop talking about the Epstein files. We're coming for you. And we know there's 6 co-conspirators. Of course, Leon Black is littered in there. Les Wexner is obviously a FBI. They feel really good about his involvement in the trafficking of women, not tax evasion or misuse of charitable funds with him and Jeffrey, what they were doing, but as a human sex trafficker. Les Wexner, there's enough to indict him, try him, and then execute him. And they won't do it. And Trump says it's because he's protecting his friends, but most likely it's because of the 34,000 mentions inside these Epstein files in which Donald Trump, we've only seen half of what the law says. Right now, Todd Blanche is breaking federal law. Congress passed a law, which means it outranked anything he wants to play, that you must release all the files, so they owe us $3 million, and that you also must tell us why certain things were redacted or why you chose not to prosecute this person or that person. Those internal memos and discussions and emails, those also must be produced. And of course, Pam Bondi testified just in June. Now, of course, this was not video, this was not under oath, and she was not in her capacity as Attorney General. But what did Pam Bondi give us? She said that she did, in fact, President Trump knew he was in the Epstein files. Okay, he knew he was in the Epstein files. And so if he knew he was in the Epstein files, and then we have these games being played with the Epstein files, of course, the binder rolling out the binders, that was going to be the crumbs we were looking for. That's not going to fly. Okay, so that didn't work. Then we had the forced release, and we only get half, and then all of those have over redaction. They make it very difficult for Congress members to go in and do it. They have 4 computers for all of Congress to view. They cannot bring a phone, they cannot bring a staff member, they can write notes, that's it. And so they've made it very challenging, and Todd Blanche is running that. Pam Bondi also testified in that June hearing that it was Todd Blanche the whole time driving the direction, driving the narrative around the Epstein files. And if you listen to Todd Blanche, that sounds really fair. I believe he is. He almost makes you feel stupid if you ask him a question. Mr. Blanche, is anything going to happen to the men in the files that were abusing the girls? And he acts like that doesn't make any sense. And like there's going to be some other follow-up to this. And so, well, the email says, Mr. Blanche, this person said to Jeffrey, thanks for the girl. Hope I didn't kill her and stuff like that. You don't have to follow up on any of that stuff. And why is the name blacked out? And so obviously he is the head of this. It's just enormous beast to cover up the Epstein files. And you have to listen to this, folks, or remember this. This is the greatest cover up in American history. There's nothing close to this. This is the most heinous of all crimes at the highest of levels with the deepest amount of protection around this. This is a foul. And so we really need 2 things. See, that same 25% we were talking about that supported the Iran war, they're also very resistant to say, give us the files. Same group of people. And that's a small number for Donald Trump. It's not enough to win elections in November. And so, of course, what happens to Donald Trump in November? Well, he loses control, most likely of, for sure, the House, but the Senate too. That's impeachment territory. Or at least we're going to put the brakes on anything else you wanted to do. You're not going to get any judges through. You're not going to get anybody sworn in on us. It's over. Trump's second term will shut down permanently at 2 years because he chose to play games with the Epstein files. He chose to get into a war instead of dealing with the Epstein files. And I get it. How do you deal with the Epstein files when you're a big player in them? When you're mentioned 34,000 times, how do you say, okay, well, let's see what's in them? You know what you did. He knows exactly what he did. Howard Lutnick knows exactly what he was doing in 2012 when he said, oh, once I knew out Jeffrey was doing, I said, I will never be in the same room. And then he takes his family down there to the island. These people are lying to us and they're doing nothing about it. And so you have Thomas Massie for not that much longer, folks. You have him till January. And the problem is that he's who's going to take him serious? Nobody's going to join that crowd. He's going to have to go down on the floor and read the names. Of course, Congress members have full protection. They cannot be sued for libel or anything disparaging said on the floor. And so he should just go down there as soon as possible. And I assume he still will. He probably needs to figure out his safety, his security, his exit plan. Once you say those names, it's all over. And so we then see the system begin to crack, but at a turbo speed because they put the cover up on it. If Trump was clean, but he was still didn't like the idea of taking down all these people simultaneously, people he knew, people he liked, people he, geez, I don't want to see this happen to him, that kind of thing. But they put the cover up on it. So now once it's revealed, that guy's involved, that guy's involved, that guy's involved. And then you try to lie and hide this stuff. I mean, it's going to be unforgivable. That's why the system, as Pam Bondi also said, will collapse. Absolutely will collapse. How can you pay taxes to these people? And we've said it, no indictments, no taxes. We, the American people, can't pay a government who's protecting high-level major pedophilia and pay you taxes for that service. We can't do it. Are you crazy? Are you nuts? And so we have to do that. And that's what was so disappointing as we saw the fake release of the Epstein files. The cover-up was well in effect, well in swing. And the American people didn't flinch. It didn't seem to bother them that children have been locked in closets, they're being abused, they're being discarded away. That didn't unite the country. What is going on in the hearts of Americans that didn't cause the revolt? The one that the government was going to say, okay, we're going to have to deal with this. They could really burn it all down and start over if we don't do something about it. And we didn't flinch. We just said, "Eugh." And then we went back to our day because we had dinner plans or we had a ball game that weekend or this and that and the other. In the summer, how are we going to pay attention to the Epstein files? We've got so much fun coming up for ourselves. I guess that's the mentality. I wish to think it was different, but we have a problem right now where the powers that be are the ones holding the keys. Todd Blanche, I mean, it's going to have to be subpoenaed by Congress and a relentless pursuit of truth once he's there. That's the only way. Donald Trump, Todd Blanche, Kash Patel, these people are not coming to the rescue. They are not going to say, hey, turns out we over redacted. We'd like to get those out to the American people. We'd like to see justice be done. Todd Blanche says if we found some evidence of a co-conspirator, we would, of course, go after it. Well, but we all saw that there was co-conspirators and the FBI knew there was co-conspirators. That's why they had a file going on Jeffrey Epstein co-conspirators. What do you think? We're that stupid? We have the internet. So that waits for Donald Trump when he gets home. And then you also have this resentful, very upset Zionist crowd that does not like the deal. And that's going to cause heat. If you've already heard the Mark Levins of the world, the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Laura Loomers, the hardcore ones who say Donald Trump, just even negotiating with these people is an abomination. These terrorists they never wanted peace in the first place. That's the heart of the Zionists against Iran. They wanted them wiped out. They had no intention of peace. And that's shameful coming from our greatest ally. You mean you got us into a war in which you never sought peace or a resolution? You wanted this to be an annihilation the whole time? Really? And you didn't ask us or get permission or coordinate this at all? You know what? We're done with you. And I think that's kind of what happened here, is that this was way more than the U.S. could handle. Are you kidding me? What a foolish, foolish thing. This will go down and it's a great history lesson for foolish military decisions. Of course, they ripped Hitler going into Russia in the winter, that being a collapse, that being the downfall. This could very well be not just for Donald Trump. I mean, he put his presidency on these issues, Iran and Epstein. He put his whole existence, his pride, his ego, the art of the deal, the two-term Trump president, the guy who they persecuted and he came, all these things that he's so proud of. He put Jeffrey Epstein and Iran on the table and bet his legacy on those two things. And they've gone terribly from him. He lost half his fans over Epstein. He cost $100 billion in economic waste here in America. We still have inflation as a result, and we don't know. I mean, gas can go from $3.50 to $4.50 for the rest of the year. Well, of course it could. That's too high for the American people when they were already suffocating with high inflation. Rates are not going down. If you saw the Fed this week, rates go up. They're actually recommending a rate hike. Why? Inflation. And we have no grasp on it. And Donald Trump knew there was inflation when he came in. It was supposed to be atop the list of the agenda. It's not been dealt with. In fact, it's been made worse. You can promise yourself right now, whatever you think about Joe Biden, and I think he was absolutely atrocious. What a scam, what a fake, what a horrendous thing to have on the history books of America that Joe Biden was president. And that's what he did. He let all those immigrants in. He let the homosexuality, the LGBTQ come flooding into the White House. Uh, you know, having ice cream all the time, doing nothing. 300 billion to Ukraine, 13. I mean, you go on and on. He was a horrific president. Shame on America for putting him in. Okay. So whatever you think, but whatever you thought about him outside of that, Trump's economy is more expensive. It's more expensive today than it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. It's more expensive today. And that's Trump. And Trump, we were promised that he would get after that as an issue, promised us deportations too, not getting those, not going to get those, right? Certainly not when you lose control in November. And now you're a lame duck on an island, more so seeking a pardon from J.D. Vance at that time. And Trump did say that this is J.D. Vance's deal with Iran. He's the one that finalized the negotiations. And so he said, I like the idea of blaming J.D. Vance if this doesn't work out. And you could call that cowardly. You could call that shameful. This was the biggest war since World War II for America. I know we spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those countries were not of the same ilk as Iran. So this was the biggest foe. Of course, you could say through proxy, Russia over the last 4 years with Ukraine. But this was one. This was a direct attack. We're going after a big player, 92 million people, a lot of landscape, a lot of resources, a lot of history, 5,000-year-old culture that we thought we would just wipe out, and we didn't. We couldn't. This was a big one. So why on earth would you have J.D. Vance be the guy making this deal? You bet your legacy. So J.D. Vance, who was a never Trumper, isn't that ironic? Here we have a never Trumper. J.D. Vance was out there talking about he would start wars. He would cause trouble for America. He would be a disgrace to the presidency. And of course, now he's lapping it up, telling us how wonderful President Trump is. But he's the final. Trump gave him the keys. The leash was loose, and JD got the deal done. Trump signed the deal. He said, I can blame JD if it doesn't go well. But this was your job to do. You're the one that decided to go over and blow this up because of Epstein. You're the one that has chosen to not put Israel in check and check them hard. You're the one that chose to be led around by these Zionist, globalist, neocon people because they were giving you money. Miriam Adelson is a huge fan of the war in Iran. Same Miriam Adelson that gave Trump $250 million. And of course, the buffoon in Kentucky, $20 million for Ed Galron, who took out Tom Massey. So does that feel like America first? This Jewish person, Zionist Jewish person, gives a ton of money. We do what she says. That doesn't feel like America first. Her interests aren't the same as ours, the billionaire casino magnate. Okay, so we have Israel left out. Now, Israel has a few cards to play because, of course, they are masters at the false flag. Of course, we know about the false flag. They tried it in the USS Liberty. They are absolutely with 9/11. They've allowed U.S. service members in harm's way, even though they had intelligence that would have prevented those losses. Because why? They want America in the same fight as they're in. They want us to feel the pain they're feeling, and we are one. And that's why they tried to do this military alliance, this intelligence alliance. And you see the trouble. So they can smell that we're done with Israel here in America. And we pray that Israel comes to the Lord Jesus Christ. That really would take care of all their issues, really like that. The prophets told them this was the Messiah. You rejected him. Hit your knees right now and say, will you forgive me? Okay, that's the best thing that could happen to Israel right now. Okay, but it is in fact the most Christ-hating country in the world. I don't know that you can find a religion more hostile to Jesus Christ than Judaism, and all the prophets. Of course, they killed them and persecuted, and so of course a terrible track record with Christians. But we've taken this allegiance too far. But now it's kind of out there on the table. This is how the sausage was made, folks, and it's not that pretty. And I think for the first time in public, in mass, Israel's been held to account for, hey, we said, stop doing this. You're doing this. And now I'm going to reprimand you. The Trump phone call. You're effing crazy. You knock it off. We almost have a deal. And then Bibi has a hard decision because he knows he goes to jail if they settle this deal. He knows that Iran will only get richer, only get stronger as a result of this deal, which means they're going to stay where they're at, which means they're also going to have to get rid of these greater Israel aspirations, and that they're not going to be in this constant state of war. They walk around every day thinking everybody's out to get them and they're really not. But if you have that attitude where you think everybody's out to get me, you're probably not that pleasant to be around. It's probably hard to really get comfortable and get to know you if you think everybody in the world is against you. And if you notice, Israel has just one friend, the United States, and they might lose that one. And you notice we don't have a lot of great friends anymore. We have Israel. And that was a really poor choice to go with. Israel really has become the spoiled, mid-40s trust fund kid, won't get off the couch. He's spending like crazy. The parents have finally said, I can't take it, get out. And he can't handle it. So you can expect some hostility coming back towards Trump, coming back towards America from Israel. Remember, Trump was just bragging he was 99% in Israel. We are going to follow up and get that, popularity vote in Israel and see where he is currently trending. I would imagine it's less than 50% because what we've heard from the Zionist side is this seems really inappropriate to be getting that cozy with such a suicidal terroristic organization. This is Israel telling us what a bad deal, but they weren't involved, right? And I hope this sets a new standard. Don't you ever come back here looking to get us involved in your stuff. The question is, would the U.S. really let Israel get destroyed by Iran? Would they come rushing in? Israel attacks Iran. Iran says, that's it. We're going to slaughter you. Would the U.S. really allow that? I would say there's zero chance they would, but you know what? It probably would be the most appropriate thing. Once you've set the standard, we're not fighting anymore, and we're not involved anymore. We don't need to be 7,000 miles away spending you and I's tax dollars on literally nothing. America gotten better or worse since the Iraq wars? You think America's gotten better or worse since Vietnam? Meaning, are we thriving as a culture? Are we richer? Is there more peace? Okay, none of those are true. So we have no business in any of these places. We have a lot of work to do right here at home. We're going to have an explosive weekend. I really feel like Israel is going to come out and say, you think you're going to make a deal behind our back, and we're the ones that had this grand master plan. Don't be surprised if there's not Epstein activity right now. Hey, don't you dare get going with this memorandum of understanding. We do, because we know so many of these files are in Israel, are in the possession of the Mossad. Jeff Epstein was a hired man in intelligence all around the world. So the Brits know him. Israel knows him. We know him. There is intelligence on him all over. They have as much as we do, or at least enough to say, are you sure you want to sign a peace deal with Iran? Are you sure you want us to release some of these emails? Come on now. And what would happen there? Oh, okay, we could see finishing the job bombing them. I don't know, folks. It's a wild, wacky one, but we're going to stay glued in on it. We're going to be back next week. Do this until next time. Serve the Lord Jesus Christ. Tell a friend about him. Stay good. God bless everybody.
The Matthew Dark Show, your one-stop show for truth, courage, fellowship, and faith. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.